the heart of this nation, under skies so blue,
there's a spirit that's stirring, values strong and true.
From the mountains to the prairies, from the cities to the sea, we stand for liberty, for faith and family. We're diving deep into the heart of what we believe.
Ever notice how, like, a tiny detail can totally change how you see a historical event?
Oh, yeah, totally. Like a little crack that opens up a whole new perspective.
Exactly, and that's what I felt with this phone call that's resurfaced recently.
Oh, really?
Yeah. American Wire News reported on this conversation between President Lyndon B. Johnson and Jacqueline Kennedy.
Wow.
Just weeks after JFK's assassination in 1963.
Oh, wow. So like right in the thick of it.
Right. And it's fascinating, but also kind of unsettling.
I can imagine. Yeah.
It's like a private moment suddenly in the public eye.
It's true. And you can't underestimate the weight of that historical moment.
No, absolutely not.
I mean, the grief the nation was feeling, especially Jackie Kennedy, it's hard to fathom.
It really is. And then to have this audio emerge.
Right, a personal exchange.
Between the new president and the grieving widow.
It's bound to raise so many questions.
And it has online for sure.
Yeah, I bet.
So December 21st, 1963, that's the date of the call.
Less than a month after the assassination.
It's hard to imagine the rawness of that time.
It really is.
So we're diving into this American Wire News report today.
Okay, great.
To really understand what was said, how people reacted online.
Yeah.
And try to figure out the context of this very private conversation.
Right, because it's public now.
Exactly.
And that timing, less than a month after such a traumatic event.
I know, it's crazy.
It really colors everything that's said in the call.
Absolutely.
It was such a raw period.
Totally. And one of the first things American Wire News mentions is Johnson teasing Jackie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, about leaving town without saying goodbye.
Huh, that's interesting.
It makes you wonder about their relationship even before the assassination.
Right, to have that sort of casual tone in that context.
Yeah, it feels unexpected.
It does. What was your first reaction when you read that?
I was surprised, honestly.
Yeah.
It suggests a certain familiarity between them.
Right, maybe even a long-standing dynamic.
Yeah, but then against the backdrop of the assassination?
It feels jarring.
Totally. It makes you think about how differently people deal with grief.
Exactly. And how relationships try to maintain some normalcy, even in extreme situations.
It's so complex.
It really is.
And then it gets even more interesting because the report quotes Johnson directly.
Oh, what did he say?
He said he wanted to visit her, and I'm quoting here, spank her.
Whoa. Okay, that's a phrase that definitely stands out.
Right. And the report mentions it's caused a stir online.
Yeah, I can see why. What do you make of that remark?
Well, that kind of language, especially in that context.
It hits differently with a modern audience, for sure.
It really does. You immediately question the power dynamics.
Yeah, and whether it's appropriate given the circumstances.
Absolutely. We have to remember language and social norms evolve.
Of course. But even knowing that...
It feels loaded.
It does.
And then the report goes on to quote Johnson saying, "I love you."
Wow, okay, things are getting complicated.
Right. And Jackie apparently replied, "Aren't you sweet? Where are you?"
Interesting. So she doesn't directly address the "I love you."
No. And then she mentions being mad at herself for leaving without saying goodbye.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a bit of echoing Johnson's earlier teasing.
Yeah, it feels like a back and forth between them.
Right, like maybe their relationship had its own patterns of interaction.
And we're only getting these snippets.
It's true, these lines raise more questions than they answer.
Totally. What stands out to you about Jackie's response?
I think it's almost deflecting, you know?
In what way?
The, "Aren't you sweet?" It could be genuine affection.
Right.
But it could also be a way of handling an awkward declaration.
That's a good point.
And her comment about not saying goodbye,
Yeah.
it hints at a dynamic between them.
A dynamic we don't fully understand.
Exactly.
And then Johnson reiterates that he was almost mad about her leaving without a hug.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says he misses her and is thinking of her.
That makes sense.
Yeah, he acknowledges how hard Christmas will be and wishes he could make it happier.
It's a mix of personal feelings and awareness of the bigger picture.
It really is. How do you see those sentiments coexisting in that moment?
It speaks to how complex human emotions are, especially in times of crisis.
It's true.
Johnson was probably dealing with his own grief.
Right.
And the huge pressure of suddenly becoming president.
All at the same time.
While also trying to comfort Jackie.
Yeah.
The missing her and wishing her well.
Yeah.
Those feel like natural responses in that situation.
Right. Offering empathy and support.
Exactly.
But then there's another moment that feels out of sync.
What's that?
Johnson explains he can't leave Washington for Christmas.
Okay.
Because Congress would spank me and hit me right in the face.
Oh, wow.
It's such a casual, almost funny image.
Yeah, and then what?
He jokingly tells Jackie he'll do the same to her next time if she doesn't say goodbye.
So that jocularity again.
Right. It feels so surprising.
Why do you think he used that kind of tone?
It's hard to say for sure.
Yeah.
Maybe it reflects his personality.
You mean like he used humor even in tense situations?
Yeah, as a way to connect or lighten the mood.
That's possible.
Or maybe it was an attempt to relate to Jackie.
Right, to break through the sadness.
But as those online reactions show,
Yeah.
it doesn't translate well for a lot of modern listeners.
It doesn't.
And Jackie's response is also interesting.
Tell me about it.
She mentioned getting a vitamin B shot from Dr. Travel when Johnson returns.
Okay, that's specific.
It is, and it's caught people's attention online.
I bet. Do we know who Dr. Travel was?
Well, Dr. Janet Travel was actually JFK's physician.
Oh, wow.
And she continued to serve President Johnson for a time.
Interesting.
She was known for treatments involving injections.
Injections.
Yes, sometimes they included vitamins.
Okay, so it could be a literal statement about a medical treatment.
It could, but the way it's brought up,
Right.
almost as a playful response to Johnson's teasing.
It suggests there might be more to it.
Yeah, maybe an inside joke or a subtle way of responding to his remark.
Without more context, it's a mystery.
It is, and that's why it sparks so much speculation.
Right.
And speaking of online reactions, American Wire News really highlights that initial shock.
Oh, yeah. Tell me more.
They quote people saying, "Oh my God," and that's an odd interaction.
Wow.
Some even call it bizarre and uncomfortable to listen to.
Especially so soon after the assassination.
Exactly. One person even said their mouth dropped.
It shows how sensitive this period still is.
It does.
There's a certain reverence associated with that time.
Yeah, and to hear what seems like casual banter,
Yeah, especially with the undertones we've discussed.
it feels jarring.
It challenges the image we have of interactions between a president and a former first lady.
Exactly, especially during a time of national mourning.
Right.
And it goes beyond shock. Some online users have a darker interpretation.
Oh, really?
One person speculates that Johnson had a crush on her and would harass her.
Wow. That's a serious accusation.
It is even presented as speculation in the news report.
What do you think it says about how people process this call decades later?
I think it shows how these glimpses into the past
Yeah.
can be seen through our current lens.
It's true. We project modern concerns onto historical figures.
And without complete context,
Right.
people will make sense of things based on their own understanding of relationships
And power dynamics.
and appropriate behavior.
Exactly.
The fact that there's such a strong reaction,
Yeah,
it really underscores the discomfort some feel with the tone of the call.
it does.
And the vitamin B shot comment has really intrigued people.
Yeah, I can see why.
American Wire News quotes one user just asking, "What did she mean by that?"
It's become a focal point for speculation.
Right. Was it a coded message?
A private joke.
Just a literal statement about her health?
We're left wondering.
We are.
It reminds me how much is unsaid in personal conversations.
Totally, especially in close relationships.
What might have been clear to Johnson and Jackie
Yeah,
becomes a puzzle for us listening years later.
absolutely.
It shows the limitations of interpreting historical moments.
Based on incomplete information.
Exactly.
But American Wire News also presents another perspective.
So what's that?
Some online commenters suggest that this lighthearted conversation,
It was actually normal back then,
really?
especially among old Southern guys, one person said.
So trying to provide cultural and historical context.
Right. How important is it to consider those potential differences in social norms?
I think it's crucial.
Yeah.
We can't truly understand interactions from the past without appreciating the norms of that time.
Absolutely.
Communication styles, expressions of grief, the nature of relationships.
Yeah.
They might have been very different from today.
It's true, and while it doesn't excuse anything that feels inappropriate now,
Of course not.
it offers a more nuanced understanding of what might have been acceptable then.
Or even comforting
Right.
within that specific context.
And American Wire News itself weighs in too.
Oh, how so?
They acknowledge how jarring the tone feels given the timing.
Yeah,
And Jackie's mourning.
right.
But they also say Johnson's playful remark about spanking
Yeah.
might just be his personality.
Even if it seems out of step today. Exactly. It's interesting that even the news report struggles with how to interpret this.
It does. It shows how hard it is to analyze historical interactions.
We bring our modern values and perspectives.
But we need to consider the personalities involved,
Yeah.
their history, the social norms of the time.
It's a lot to juggle.
It is. American Wire News is trying to navigate those different layers.
They are, and it brings us back to the unanswered questions.
Like what?
Beyond the vitamin B shot,
Right.
there's a sense that this excerpt might not be the whole story.
It's true. We're only hearing snippets.
Yeah, and we're missing the tone of voice, the body language, the context of their relationship.
It's the limitation of any historical record.
Absolutely, especially something as personal as a phone call.
Right. We're getting a fragmented glimpse.
And our interpretations are shaped by what we don't know as much as what we do.
It's true. Nuances and inside jokes.
They become open to speculation.
Decades later,
Yeah.
by a public removed from that moment.
So as we try to understand all this, the main tension seems to be this contrast
Okay, what contrast?
between the lighthearted, even teasing parts of the conversation
Yeah.
and the backdrop of national grief and Jackie's personal trauma.
It's hard to reconcile those two realities.
It really is.
And the online reactions highlight that tension. You have the shock and discomfort
Right.
alongside attempts to understand the call within its historical context.
And the personal dynamic between Johnson and Jackie.
It shows how one brief interaction
Yeah.
can evoke so many different responses
When viewed through the lens of history,
and our own expectations.
so much to think about.
So much.
It leaves us with this final thought.
Okay, I'm listening.
This small window into a private conversation.
Yeah,
A few lines between a president and a grieving widow.
right.
Just weeks after a national tragedy.
It's powerful.
What does it make you consider about human interaction? Especially during times of stress and grief.
A good question.
How do we even begin to understand moments from the past? Through the constantly changing perspectives of the present.
It's a challenge.
It is. And what questions does this exchange raise for you?
Yeah.
About leadership, about grief, about how people communicate in difficult times.
So much to ponder.
It really is food for thought.
It is.
Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
My pleasure.
Until next time.
See ya.